2 weeks have flown by since New Year's. Naomi is drinking her tea one morning with an empty stare, lost once again in her thoughts. She's ruminating about her New Year's resolutions and how she really needs to get started on them as the second half of January has just begun. She wants to start yoga to learn how to do all these cool poses and for her overall physical and mental health. She also wants to learn Italian because she has always thought that it sounded so beautiful. She vowed to learn how to draw cartoon comics because she loved doing it as a child and still very much does. But why is she feeling so burdened and heavy about it today? When Naomi first started daydreaming about these future projects, she was brimming with excitement. Then, when she shared these dreams of hers in vivid detail with her loved ones, they reciprocated her enthusiasm and told her that, given her immense potential and her many attributes, her future success was a no-brainer. Upon hearing such encouraging feedback, Naomi felt immense satisfaction. It was almost as if she had already succeeded. So, as she rejoiced in these feelings, she ignored an almost imperceptible pinch at the top of her stomach, which at the time she decided to dismiss as excitement. Back to today, and the pinch in her stomach had grown into a pit. Her shoulders had been growing heavier and her energy was being drained faster and faster each passing day. These dream projects that once acted like empowering mirrors reflecting all of Naomi's potential and future selves now reflected dread, disappointment, and shame. So, what happened to Naomi? And will she be able to overcome this slump? Will she be able to turn this nightmare back into the beautiful dream that it once was? In the French political philosopher Montesquieu's collection of handwritten notes entitled Thoughts, I love how simple that is, very efficient. He said, "Better is the mortal enemy of good." This might sound like a weird, counterintuitive sentence, or somewhat dramatic at least. Let me give you a real-life analogy that I think most people can relate to. You know, when you make a purchase and you buy a new product that is a bit or a lot over the usual budget that you spend for said product.
It can be a food item, it can be a dish, like those expensive, beautiful plates. It can be makeup or a skincare item. It can even be an item of clothing, a coat, shoes, bags, pants.
You were first super excited when you were thinking of buying the object, imagining yourself with the object, and you were even excited when you bought it, even though the moment you bought it, there might have been a teeny tiny tinge of guilt as well. We've all been there. The struggle is real. So to cope with this tinge of guilt, you tell yourself immediately that you're not going to use this precious possession mindlessly and recklessly, and that it will be reserved for special or at least worthy occasions, whatever that is. But before you know it, the season for wearing your item of clothing has passed, or you don't like it anymore, and turns out you barely wore it a handful of times. The makeup skincare product that you bought is nearing its expiry date and you only used it twice, or worse, it's still in the package. I've been there. Or years have passed and the beautiful dishes, plates that you bought have been collecting dust because you don't ever really organize huge meals at home, given your schedule, etc. So let's be real. You wasted more money than if you had actually enjoyed these purchases fully until they had naturally been worn out from actual good use. Why do we do this? Because better is the mortal enemy of good, and also because of potential. To explore how potential can act as a curse on one's life, we are going to look at the case study of gifted kids, because they're pretty much the most extreme example of what all of us went through to some extent at some point in our lives. I personally was never a gifted kid or anything. I was never offered to skip a grade or participate in one of those special programs at school for the gifted kids. Nothing of the sort. I just had, the thing with me was that I had good grades without really studying until the end of high school. Not exceptional grades at all, just good grades. The point is that I never had to study for these grades, which caused two very big problems and would become huge obstacles and burdens in my life for many, many years to come. So my first problem was this. School is meant to teach you things in class, obviously, that's the primary purpose, but it's actually also meant to teach you how to study, which is why as you get older, the amount of homework, the work that you do at home alone, increases. It's meant to teach you discipline, autonomy, responsibility, and self-management. Let me tell you, I did not learn any of those. Consequently, when I arrived at university, where the overwhelming majority of your grades come from big projects, essays, dissertations, exams, all of which you're supposed to do in your free time over the course of, and you're supposed to do them weeks and months in advance, it was a nightmare. I hated all of it, and I hated myself even more. Obviously, I decided to get my shit together eventually when it was really needed, but I still completed all of my assignments pretty much last minute, and it took blood, sweat, regret, and many, many tears. So the second big problem that I encountered is that because I was not studying all the way from elementary, primary school to the end of high school, and I was still getting good grades, every single person around me, friends, family, teachers, kept telling me that I had so much potential. I was told this so often, and I understand that it was meant to be a means of motivation and that people were hoping that I would work a little bit. And it came out of love, so I harbor absolutely no resentment whatsoever. But sadly, the reality is that every time it was mentioned again,
that I had this potential and if I just applied myself, I would achieve such great things,
it added an extra few meters or feet to the mountain that I was supposedly expected to climb. And so what did I do in response to that? Nothing. I froze completely. I tried even less, and I subconsciously embodied the personality of someone who hates anything that has to do with studying, effort, trying hard, working hard. Obviously, at the time, I didn't know that's what I was doing. I thought that was my real personality, but it was just me protecting my ego as a young teenager child. Because it was ingrained in my tiny little brain at the time that the moment I actually tried, if my efforts didn't get me as high as that mountain that people wanted me to climb, I was going to be a failure and a disappointment. Gifted kids experience this tenfold. The Davidson Institute, that is dedicated to taking special care of gifted kids, said that one of the common issues found among these gifted children is the avoidance of activities they fear they will fail at, because of the pressure put on them due to their above average potential. Can you tell I have beef with that word? In the same vein, in an article for the Roper Review entitled Vulnerabilities of Highly Gifted Children, the author, Wenda Rodal, an expert in the education of gifted individuals, said,
unsure about their ability to live up to their own expectations and the expectation of others, confused about the direction of their true talent, and worried about the ways in which they are different from average students while simultaneously fearing mediocrity. These are the dilemmas which face gifted students attempting to define themselves in a confusing and often hostile world.
She adds that they are constantly being told you aren't even beginning to tap into your real ability. A multi-talented child may well have the ability to excel at high levels in every single subject area, but realities of time and the dictates of the child's own interests make living up to your potential in every single area a literal impossibility. And so in a way, we were all told our whole lives that potential was this amazing thing to have and to be told that you have, but it's actually a living nightmare. It is the equivalent of having a perfect twin version of yourself that will always, always, always be 100 steps ahead of you, no matter what you do, and is compared to you every single day. This also obviously creates ego problems. In his video on gifted children, Dr. K says,
in that gap is where the ego lives, okay? So it's really, really hard, right? Because you're set up with these expectations. People don't really acknowledge that because you're capable of a lot, it's actually going to take like a lot of work to take that potential and bring it to fruition, right? And that's the biggest thing is people just lose sight of the fact that building a mansion actually takes more work than building a shack. And your entire life, people have told you like you should build this mansion because that's what you're capable of.
He uses the metaphor of building a mansion which is the equivalent of the potential of gifted kids versus building a shack, which is, I guess, what is expected of normal kids. And he says that they lose sight of the fact that building a mansion takes so much more work than building a shack. In your entire life, people have been telling you to build a mansion because that's what you're capable of, but they don't tell you that it takes a lot more work than building a shack, and so you feel like a failure because you barely put in the work to build a shack, and then you're thinking, but I was told that this amount of work would build a mansion, but it's not. It's barely building a shack. So then you feel really stupid, but people keep telling you that you have so much potential. Do you see the vicious cycle? So if you've been in this situation, whether you're a gifted kid or not, I feel for you, and don't worry, there's absolutely a light at the end of the tunnel. You just need, once again, a perspective shift. It is often reminded to us that we are just the sum of our stories. What this means basically is that your reality is shaped by all of the stories that you tell yourself on a daily basis about yourself and about the world that surrounds you. A lot of that has to do with your personal experiences, obviously, but just as importantly, it has to do with the stories that you were told, that we were all told and have consumed from childhood to this very day. It is no surprise to anyone if I tell you that many of the stories we were fed through the media have often led us to false views of reality on various aspects of life, such as success, relationships, romance, wealth, justice. Through the lens of some of the most famous widespread success stories that we all share today as common narratives, we're going to explore how we got scammed, if you will, or at the very least, very strongly misled about the concept and perception of potential versus its reality. I'm going to use the following examples because for many of us, our view of the biggest success stories is extremely skewed and distorted. And here I'm not referring to financial success, but rather to the success of those who are seen as the greatest at their jobs, skills, and crafts, the GOATs. The problem with our perception of the GOATs is that we only really look at them once they have achieved success. While we do see snippets of their struggles to get to GOAT status, it is very often glamorized and romanticized, and for the sake of storytelling, obviously. But in reality, we really brush over the hundreds and thousands of times where they practiced for hours, failed repeatedly, and were for a very long time mediocre. We especially don't mention how slow and boring and repetitive the path to excellence is. Even in anime, the training arcs are glamorized into 30-second edits with hard music. In Legally Blonde, the study scenes are glamorized with movements and fun music. Of course, when we watch that, we feel motivated, but we do get slapped in the face because then we want to do that and we do it, and it just hits very different. Reality hits very hard. No one likes to hear about it, obviously, but it is an essential part of success. That mediocre, I hate that word, or that not fully realized person and version of yourself is the one who will fight for excellence. People say it's good to look back and cringe at your past self because it shows that you've truly evolved. While I agree sometimes and to some extent, it is important to thank your past self because that's the person that pushed through during the tough times, and you wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them. The point I'm trying to make here is that you can use potential, but you have to use it right. The scam, the misunderstanding that will hurt you and keep you from succeeding, is thinking that the GOATs, the greatest of all time, the people born with natural immense talent, reached the top easily and almost effortlessly. When you think of your dreams and your potential, you should ask yourself, do I have the potential to work as long and as hard as I need to rise to the top? That's the real question you should ask yourself. Because if you're talented, without insane discipline and hard work, your potential is completely useless. For instance, if we take some of the GOATs, Michael Jordan, Michael Phelps, Serena Williams, Steve Jobs, Beyonce, it would be so easy to dismiss these people's success as a result of their superiority from birth, their innate talents, just because they ended up being prodigies. Sure, there are lots and lots of people who are born with innate abilities. That's undeniable. But the truth is that the successful ones work harder than anyone else. For example, and I don't recommend that, so don't follow his example, but Steve Jobs pretty much worked himself to death. Even Einstein, often known as the personification of what a genius is, was a workaholic. He actually died of internal bleeding caused by the rupture of an abdominal aortic aneurysm, which sounds awful, and he had struggled from that condition for years and years. But as described in James Clear's article about Einstein, for a number of years, Einstein had suffered from attacks of upper abdominal pain, which usually lasted for 2 to 3 days and were often accompanied by vomiting. These attacks usually occurred about every 3 to 4 months. And despite that horrendous pain, Einstein never stopped working. He published papers well into the 1950s, and even on the day of his literal death in 1955, he was found working on a speech that he was going to give on television, and he had brought the draft with him to the hospital. Obviously, the speech draft was never finished. Again, I'd strongly advise you to not go that hard because health is the most important thing, and without it, you are nothing. But this is all to say that potential, even if you're the biggest genius in the world, without a work ethic is completely void. Actually, a person with much less potential than you, but a much greater work ethic, will go further. And unless you accept that you're going to be pretty awful at the beginning and then mediocre for a while, don't even bother trying. Because if we were to create a hierarchy of the people who are the most likely to succeed, it would, from worst to least, it would go people with unused potential, meaning that they don't work for it. They would be at the bottom. Then in the middle, you would have the people who don't really have much potential, but who work hard. And obviously at the top, you have people who have potential and work just as hard as that second group, if not harder. And trust me, we all have potential in something. I have yet to meet a person that has no redeeming qualities. Use this time that you're building up your work ethic to try a bunch of stuff. Trial and error is the single best way for you to discover who you really are and what your place in this earth is, where you can mix purpose and pleasure. Now, before we jump into the solutions, advice, practical tips, I'm going to tell you a little story that I went through because I feel like it couldn't be more relevant to this video. Before starting YouTube, there were 2 whole years where I procrastinated starting a YouTube channel just thinking about it. It was pretty torturous. And one of the biggest reasons was because of everything that we talked about previously. I had been a long time consumer of YouTube, and just seeing how high the bar was now made me feel like it wasn't even worth trying. Then I would get struck with action paralysis, thinking about the gap between my actual current level, which was 0, and the amazing videos that I daydreamed about. So finally, after 2 long years, I said, fuck it. And I finally understood what I was doing wrong. And so I decided that I would start making YouTube videos and that it didn't matter how bad the quality was. I kind of accepted, okay, for 1 to 2 years, don't even care about the quality, just post regularly, anything. Surprisingly enough, once I got started, the initial stages went super well. In my previous videos, I talk about this and call it the honeymoon phase, which is the first phase of learning any new skill or starting any new project where everything is super fun and game-like and you feel like a little kid. I feel nostalgic already. Until my very last video, I was doing great and I had not felt the paralyzing burden of potential at all. I was just doing my thing, one step in front of the other. But then for some reason, either by some insane coincidence or some universal forces that wanted to test me as I decided to make a video about potential, the action paralysis induced by potential struck me as I was in the middle of creating this very video. It has never taken me so long to make a video. I don't even know when I started scripting for this video because it was so long ago, weeks and weeks, at least a month. I got a 2-week holiday from university and I had told myself, great, I'll be able to spend the entire 2 weeks doing twice as much work for my YouTube since I don't have school. And I'll even be able to make this video on potential and even 1 or 2 more. Wrong. Here's the huge mistake that I made. As the holiday started and I had more time, I thought it would be a great idea to do some research by finding 1, other YouTube channels that I resonate with or that I admire and that I am inspired by on a creative and intellectual level. 2, I researched videos on how to make better videos technically, meaning how to edit better, film better, script better, speak better, pace better, etc., storytelling. And well, let me tell you, I found a lot, way too much for that matter. I dug myself in a hole, a dark rabbit hole. And so what I ended up doing is I spent the entire vacation binging amazing video essays and tutorials from other creators who often were older than me, creators with studios and insane setups with a bunch of cool cameras, lights, mics, soundproofing, teleprompters, beautiful houses, whatever. But also creators who had been in the game for years and years. creators who had hired editors, motion graphic designers, researchers to help them create these masterpieces. And I knew that, but it was the wildest experience because initially I was just in awe as I was watching these videos. Yet, as a baby creator, all I saw was this mountain that I had to climb, getting higher and higher and higher and higher, casting a very dark shadow on me and everything around me. As I tried to get back to actual work, I started scripting this video, and as I was doing so, I kept thinking of a bunch of cool things that I wanted to do to accompany this script. Animations, edits, visuals, sounds, special effects, drawings, different angles, what have you. And then I froze. I realized that I am nowhere close to being able to do any of these things I was dreaming about at this point in time. Sure, and thankfully, I absolutely love writing these scripts. But at that time, I felt that my level of, it's still true to this day, but my level of editing and animation skills and my setup the quality were so inefficient compared to the potentially high quality masterpiece that I could create if I had already had all the training experience, the money, etc. Those thoughts creeped up and were acting as parasites in my mind, and it was so bad that I came to the conclusion that me trying wasn't even worth it. That's what I felt, just for a little moment. So what did I do at that time? For the next 3 days, I kept procrastinating. I did anything but work on creating this damn video. I cleaned, I read books, I journaled, I exercised, I cooked. I don't cook that much. One of the things I also did was to just lay down several times a day, looking at the ceiling, feeling completely drained and burnt out, even though I wasn't doing anything productive. And then as I was lying down just looking at the ceiling one of those days, it hit me. The sheer irony of the situation I was in, the fact that what I was going through was the exact thing that I was going to talk about in this video. I don't know why, but that hit me really hard at that moment because I felt quite stupid and I felt imposter syndrome. I was telling myself, who am I to make a video about this if I'm still burdened by this type of problem? But in the end, I realized that it was actually a blessing in disguise because it helped me rewrite the script and connect to it that much more because I had just gone through it all over again. What helped me get back into it also was asking myself why I started making videos in the first place and why I was so excited and invested in making a video on this very topic. The answer being, I started because I love doing this and I got this particular idea about this particular subject of potential because I've been through this many, many times and every single time I have overcome it. So that's what I'm going to do again. And the next day I was back to work writing this exact story. What is important to note here is that even though you've overcome a problem countless times, there's a high chance that it will creep up on you again and again and again through your entire life as you challenge yourself and venture into new waters constantly. And that's okay. It's not anything to freak out about. Even psychologists and writers of self-help books admit that at times they completely forget to take the wonderful advice that they give.
Sometimes my friends send me a photo of a page from my book and they're like, you wrote this, like, why are you being like this now?
I know it's so hard to help ourselves a lot of times, but that's why we need each other.
So next time it happens to you, just take some time to reflect, take a step back, and reassess the situation in light of the experiences and knowledge that you've amassed throughout your entire life. Try to make connections with times where you felt this type of thing already and how you overcame it. Obstacles will never ever disappear, but every single time you will get better at overcoming them, and you will overcome them quicker and quicker. Now let's get to the heart of the topic, the solutions. A reminder, this is not an exhaustive list. There's certainly many other solutions to this problem out there, and I'm sure that they will come to you naturally as you progress in your own personal journey. I'm just going to share the ones that have significantly helped me out of action paralysis into what is now pretty much daily productivity in some form, which, as a person who used to live in action paralysis 90% of the time, is a huge, huge feat. For my fellow visual learners, you can check my blog in the description to see all of these solutions in written form if you like to have a visual review after the audio, which I do, so there you go. Okay, first off, and if you heard my personal story just before, you can understand why, but I would advise you to get to the more complex and elaborate tutorials later. At first, what you want to do is just play with the new thing, like a child that would play with paint and colored pencils. The purpose of this is to familiarize yourself with the materials, the tools, and the environment. Once you're really familiarized with all of that and comfortable, you can then learn the super basics and then play some more with that once you learn the basics. By doing this, you will also discover which parts you like the most, which is crucial for long-term success, because later on you're going to know what you want to spend most of your time doing within that skill, and you'll be able to delegate eventually the things that bring you a little bit less joy. But it's still important for you to play with everything so that if you ever do delegate, you're still able to communicate with the people you work with. That's really important when you work within a team, understanding what every person's doing. Don't try to skip any of these steps. Enjoy the process and the baby steps. Number 2 is ego management. Yes. You need to practice ego management, because if your ego is too attached, i.e., if you think your value is directly tied to and dependent on the quality of anything you create right now, independent of your current skill level, then you're totally screwed. This is the root of the problem with potential. Your ego will always find sneaky ways to make you procrastinate forever, or make you self-sabotage, or find excuses of why you actually want to give up completely. It will turn you into a lazy perfectionist, which will result in you watching time fly and your life go by and your life go to waste, completely paralyzed while dreaming of these amazing, super high standards that you have for yourself. To prevent that, learn to manage your ego by telling yourself that your value is unconditional. Don't compare yourself to others. I'm sure you know that. This is your unique journey. There's no comparison to be made. Number 3, perfectionism. To come back to the quote from the beginning, better is the mortal enemy of good, especially when you focus too much on better. Respectfully, perfectionism is not even something you should be thinking about until you get to an advanced level at your craft. In the beginner and well into the intermediate stages, it's very much quantity over quality. Then from the intermediate to advanced to the excellent stage, it gets reverse. In any case, rest assured, because good done repeatedly naturally becomes better with patience, practice, resilience, and work. Related to that is number 4, a very important consideration for you to always keep in mind, that every great achievement in life takes work and effort. And the greater the achievement, the more work and effort is needed, no matter how great your potential is and how naturally talented you are. It took me years to understand that, especially in my teens and my young adult years. You'll never get to a place where you do amazing things easily and without effort. Get completely rid of that belief. Grieve if you need to for a little while, but That's just facts.
It's way more productive to see life and the things in it with a growth mindset. If you think that I am the amount of smart I'm born with and there's nothing else I can do to fix it or change it or improve it, that is a fixed mindset. And gifted kids often think this about themselves. They didn't have to become smart. I am smart. Therefore, it's not something that needs to be worked on or improved or put effort into. It just is what it is. And because they depend on it so much and they've also put in no effort to keep it up, it becomes part of who they are and they guard it with their life. Failure must be avoided at all costs. Therefore, it is more important to keep up the illusion of intelligence than to actually learn and grow. I just need to look smart. Who cares if I actually am? But this leads to competitiveness and enviousness because you see everyone else, they're being smart and intelligent. That's an attack on your specialness, and that's personal to you.
So number 5 is about expectation management. You need to lower your short-term expectations, but you need to raise your long-term ones. When we daydream of goals that we want to manifest, we only visualize the satisfaction of obtaining the super big goal, the final goal. You need to realize that the actual moment of obtaining said goal, if you ever do, that moment is going to be super short-lived. And then what? You got to learn how to be okay the rest of the time, which will be 99% of your life. Life on the micro scale, which is your day-to-day daily life, is a chaotic mixture of hardships, discomfort, but also a bunch of small wins and small joys that you really got to learn how to savor as much as possible because they make up the bulk of your life at the end of the day. And in addition to that, thanks to planning and well-managed expectations, life on the macro scale, which are your long-term goals, can be about the accomplishment of big, great goals. It's important to understand the distinction and accept it. If we could accomplish huge things on a daily basis, it wouldn't even feel special anyway. So keep your big goals in mind and create a lot of smaller goals along the way. Now, number 6 is related to the previous point to help you with the perseverance needed to succeed on the micro day-to-day scale. You can use this principle that was described by the philosopher Nietzsche, which was to chase power and not happiness. And it's important to note that here Nietzsche didn't mean power over others, but rather power as in your ability. So find pleasure in every little skill that you acquire, every little progress that you make, and every little bit of knowledge that you learn every day by telling yourself that it's a win no matter how small. Number 7, talking the talk without walking the walk will absolutely destroy your confidence and especially disintegrate your self-trust, which is one of the most important things to build and maintain to be able to achieve anything in life. What I mean here is do not share your dreams and all of your goals too fast, too soon, too often. Because that premature satisfaction that you're going to feel is going to backfire. And you're also setting others' expectations and thus raising your expectations because of ego way too high, way too soon. I thought initially that sharing all of my goals all the time would give me motivation, and I did that for a while. But it quickly backfired because it would be very quickly replaced by a feeling of burden due to the high expectations that I implanted in others' minds and their now perceived potential that I claimed to have. Number 8, YouTubers Colin and Samir said that success is just doing a lot more of what you're already doing. So make sure to pick something that you can quite easily see yourself doing a lot of without feeling too much resistance, not just something that seems sexy and cool in your mind or when you watch others do it. And don't hesitate to do things your own way, even if you've seen no one do it that way. If I had not started applying all of these solutions, I would very much not be here filming today. Because do you think I think any of my videos are perfect right now? Hell no. I always post them feeling like there's so much more that I could have done. And yes, there is always so much more that I could have done, and they could be so much better in an imaginary utopian world that doesn't exist. But that better version of me who spent twice as much time on it, where is she? I don't see her. So respectfully, she can get lost. My camera decided to die just in time for the outro, so I'm just gonna film it on my phone. Apologies for the lower quality. That's all for today. As I said earlier, if you want the written version of this video, it's gonna be condensed in a blog post, and you can find my website in the link. You can find the link of my website in the description box below. Also, I'd love to hear your thoughts and your personal stories related to this topic, so leave a comment below and don't forget to subscribe. And just remember, potential can be really scary once we first introduce a big new project into our life. But in truth, once we look at it in the eyes and face it head on, pretty quickly we realize that it was never really that serious. I'm going to leave you by reciting one of the most powerful brand slogans of all time, which happens to summarize this entire video extremely well in 3 words: just do it.